Well, I'm John Kilpatrick. I was born and raised in this area here. I was raised over on what we call North Hominy. This is South Hominy community. And I come up here, graduated from high school in '64, and found my wife that was born and raised right here on this property. Well, as her parents got elderly, it became pretty much our chore to look after them as much as we could. So we moved up here in '77, I believe it was, in the fall of '77, because we had that gigantic flood that ruined the Inca property down there in November of '77. So that's where we've been ever since, and we've had a pretty good life up here. I was telling Tim just a short while ago how much our community, our country's changed through the years. And personally, I don't think it's all for the good. It seems like we've lost some of our neighborly attitudes that we had. I know one old fella that I farmed his property up on Davis Creek for probably 30 years after I moved up here. And when it come tobacco working time, here he'd come to help me work tobacco. Wouldn't have a cent for his labors. And we just don't see that kind of people in society anymore. And I miss it, I really do. I told somebody Saturday, they came up and got some produce out of the garden, and the lady said, "John, you're selling your product too cheap." I said, "No." I said, "I don't feel like I need to charge somebody more for anything than I would want to pay myself." And I feel like if all of us had that kind of attitude, and I'm not saying I'm a perfect example, but if all of us had that kind of attitude, I believe we'd be rid of some of the greed that we're seeing in our society today. And I think greed is one of the things that's creating problems in our society. So, I don't guess we'll ever change back unless we see real hard times, but I really miss the old mountain tradition. These old mountain people, they was a special people to me. They really were.
Hello, I'm Tim Barnwell, and I'd like to welcome you to the Face of Appalachia. We certainly appreciate you tuning in and for your support for our channel, and hope you will share it with your friends. You've been listening to my longtime friend John Kilpatrick. In this episode, he talks about his life as a farmer, his garden, canning, butchering hogs to have meat for the winter, and how things have changed over his lifetime. I first met John 40 years ago, in 1983, when a mutual friend arranged for me to visit him to document the hog butchering process on his farm in the mountains of western North Carolina. I spent the day with him making photographs and included several in my first book, The Face of Appalachia, which was published in 2003, and in my second, Honors for a Brow, released in 2007. These books, along with my third, Hands in Harmony, are the basis for this channel and are where much of the material originates. I know some of you are familiar with my work, but many are probably not, so I thought I'd take a minute to talk about how this project started and has evolved over the years. I began this endeavor in 1978. I had just graduated from college and was doing work for a magazine called Mountain Living. I wrote and illustrated an article on traditional mountain life, which was published in 1980. I made portraits of people in rural Appalachia and did oral history interviews with them where they shared stories about their lives. After the article was published, I continued to do more on my own as I'd really enjoyed meeting the people and getting to know them. I had no idea that would result in 3 books and would be something I would continue to do for 4 decades. Over that period of time, I have photographed and interviewed hundreds of folks and become good friends with many. After years of COVID and the limits it placed on getting together with others, I'm excited to get back to visiting folks I met over the years and see how they're doing today. I love YouTube and thought it would be a good way to share my experiences with others and to make programs that would honor those who have passed away. The work it took to produce my Appalachian-themed books has created a wealth of material to draw on in making episodes for the Face of Appalachia. I'm lucky to have Scott Allen, my friend, who has worked with me for over 15 years, along as co-producer to the channel to help make this happen. We've been able to showcase some fascinating folks already, including Antelope Phillips from the Book of Antelope, who relates story after story as he flips through his family album showing photographs from 6 generations, and Christine Coates from the Old Bloody Madison episode, who talks about growing up as one of 10 children in an old log cabin that still stands today. When I go out to visit someone, I have no idea what might develop, and I'm always amazed at the stories they share and how honest and direct they are about their lives and experiences growing up in the remote mountains of Appalachia. We have lots more great episodes planned, and I hope you will stay tuned and take a minute to subscribe. Now, let's get back to John Kilpatrick and see more on his farm. What does it mean to you to live in Appalachia?
Well, people have said, as a matter of fact, we had a pastor, our most recent pastor retired in March of '82. And he'd come visit me and my wife, and he'd say, John, you and Ann need to take a trip, go out west or something. And I said, Jackie, there's not enough of these green mountains out there. I said, I just love these mountains, and I want to stick with them as much as I can. For me, I've got to have some elbow room. I've got to get out here and sit down on the stump and watch my cattle. People think, well, that's stupid. Well, it may be to some people, but you know, it's medicine for me. It's kind of like I've heard people say in the field of medicine, I guess, said that petting your dog helps your blood pressure. You've probably heard that expression. Well, when you get that kind of relaxation and enjoying watching the cattle and their behavior and watching your dog as he meanders around through the cattle and things like that, it just gives you an appreciation for what we've got here in Appalachia, the mountains. So I guess I've always been here. I'm 77 years old, and unless somebody conquers me and takes me out of it, I'll die here in the mountains. But my biggest interest is probably my garden now. I really take pride in my garden. And I appreciate the fact that even though I've got some health problems, I can go into the garden and work, 2 or 3 hours and come in and lay down on my bed and rest if I need to. But I just enjoy the farm lifestyle. They took a survey in one of those things, and the lady said the reason that they were wanting to survey the farmers, they were searching to find why it is that farmers in general live longer than the other elements of the population. And I've never really heard what the answer to that is, but I think it's just the fact there's more satisfaction. But I've got a process in my tomato production, and I try to plant about 40 of a particular variety that I've been able to find up here at the First Step Farm. They're called Mountain Fresh. And I'll prepare that tomato row with, I'll lay my row off, and I'll put down fertilizer. I'll put down plenty of lime, because this blossom end rot problem that we have, they tell us, is a deficiency of calcium. Well, I use the lime as a source of calcium, and I do have a little bit of blossom end rot, but not a lot. But then people that get my tomatoes, and I try to let them get red on the vine. I don't pick them green and let them ripen. I don't pick them with the little red spot as big as a dime. For one reason, I'm colorblind, but I let them get red. I can see the red. But they have to be moved, pretty fast after that. And the people, I'm telling you, people say, I've never tasted tomatoes like that, but it's all in production. Another key in raising tomato is taking and preparing that plant bed. If you're going to put a plant in the hole, take and put a tablespoonful of Epsom salts in that hole and work it into the soil. That's a source of magnesium. And I believe that's the reason that my tomatoes taste differently than anybody else's or most other people. I've got some people started on, using the Epsom salts, but tomato production is one of my specialties. When Tim came out here, I believe it was in the early 80s. I think it may have been 82, 81 or 82, to take pictures of me butchering a hog. That's one of the things that we as old mountain people, we did every year to have fresh meat. Until today, I've not found any cured side meat like the meat that I cured. As well as the hams, I'd have a smokehouse up here, and sometimes I'd butcher as many as 8 or 10 hogs and sell country hams. And now our winters is not even cold enough for her to have, cured meat. It's risky if you want to try it. Sometimes you'll have enough cool weather to cure it, but you got to have cold weather. You got to have average temperature of, in the low 40s at least for meat to cure the way we used to cure it. We don't have milk cows anymore. We don't have workhorses, horses and sleds, and all that's been replaced by modern machinery. To butcher hogs here the way we did here out in the country, we would feed our hogs table scraps as they grew, but ideally we wouldn't butcher them until they were conditioned off of the table scraps. And what we would normally do, we would try to have hard corn and put them on corn and water diet. And that, to us, it improved the quality of the meat. It made the fat more usable. And then you try to butcher them without getting this adrenaline up. I'd always tried it whenever I shot the hog. A lot of people say, oh, I couldn't do that. Well, you can. You just got to get rid of some of these new ideas that's come along. But you try to shoot a hog and you try to make a deadly shot. That don't let his adrenaline get up. Then you bleed him. You cut his jugular vein and bleed him. And now, in the butchering process, they skin the hogs, and I don't like skinning them because if I'm going to cure the meat, I just prefer the skin to be on. I've never tried to cure one where it was skinned. I don't know whether that works well or not, really, to be honest about it. But then, like I said, you bleed him. Then the biggest work was, using the scalding barrel, scalding him, dipping him in that hot water at about 160 degrees. You don't want to get too hot, or you, as the old timers say, you'd set the hair. And if you ever set the hair, you had to shave him. So you use water at about 160 degrees, and you checked when that hair started turning loose. He was ready to pull out the scalding barrel and lay on the board, and then you scraped him by hand with, a good knife. And I've got a hog scraper too. I don't know if you saw that when I was butchering for you, but once you get him clean, you take the head off, and there's, oh my goodness, there's something that my mother always used in the process of making liver mush. The head meat, skin it, put it in a big boiler and cook it along with the liver. And oh my goodness, I can still taste her liver mush. But you'd process the head that way. Then you'd cut him down the belly and take his insides out, saving the liver. And some people would save the lungs to go in the liver mush. We didn't save much of the lungs, maybe a little bit, to go into the liver mush. And outside of that, we didn't use the lungs. We called them lights. But we'd take the guts out. And then we'd either take the backbone out or split him down the back where it'd be easier to handle. And then we'd take the backbone and the tenderloin out. And beside that backbone, between the back and about 3 or 4 inches down on the side would be the strip of what we call fat back. And you always cured your fat back with salt, nothing but salt, because it was pure fat and it didn't really absorb much of the salt, but you wanted to salt it. Then you'd take the side meat off, take the ribs out, and a lot of us here in the mountain, we'd use the backbones after we took the tenderloin off, try to leave a pretty good strip of lean. We'd take the backbones and the ribs and make a good meal out of that. And lots of times we'd can, you know, because there'd be several messes in a good hog. Well, where I killed 6, well, you'd have a bunch. But we'd make backbones, what we call backbones and ribs. You can still get that at the grocery store, but it's not the quality of what we raised. I tell you, that corn feed makes all the difference in the world. Even with the beef today, some people take their beef straight off the pasture and butcher. That's not my preference. I'll condition a beef for at least 8 weeks before I butcher it. Have him butchered. I've quit trying to butcher him because of my age and my health. But then we'd take like I said, we'd take the backbones and the ribs and we'd process them. And that left you with the shoulder, the middling, and the ham. You take the feet off. My daddy'd always eat the feet, but I never would. I just never did see anything in the hog's foot that I liked. It's nothing but fat and gristle. But he'd eat those things like they was really good. I guess they was to him, but they didn't appeal to me. So you take the feet off, and that left you with a ham and a shoulder, with the foot taken off, and then you had to trim it into a piece of meat that would be good and uniform, you know. And then you'd add your cure, your sugar cure, you'd add that to it. Rub it in, and I always rub some on the skin side. Wrap that in brown paper. Needed to be brown paper for whatever reason. I'd always strip the brown paper out of feed sacks, you know, paper feed sacks. And I would wrap that where I had it, my cure applied. I'd wrap that in that brown paper real good and tight so that it would, you know, hold that cure against the meat. Then I would hang it in the smokehouse. I would hang it with the leg down for the shoulders and the hams. And it didn't really matter about the middle and how you hung it, but it was, you had to provide a way for that moisture to migrate out of the meat, and usually the bone was the channel that it took. And if you didn't do that exactly right, you'd get a piece of meat that was spoiled on you. And I've had some to spoil. So, and you let that stuff cure there for a period of time, 2 or 3 months. If you've got cold weather, we don't have cold enough winters anymore to do that. Occasionally you will have, but we don't know when we're going to get that. Now, probably not healthy anymore, but my wife and my mother, for years and years and years, they would render the grease out of the fat in the hogs, and that's how we got our lard, what we call lard, hog lard. And I don't know what the people I've heard say, and I think it's very much true, to make biscuits out of flour and use hog lard, in the process, gave you a lot better quality biscuit. And people say, oh, that's hogwash, but it's not to us, at least. But then we'd take that meat where we had rendered the grease out, and we'd make cracklings. Cut it into small chunks, boil it in a pressure pot of some sort, and render the grease out of it and make what we call cracklings. And I don't know if you've ever tasted it or not, but you find it at the grocery store, but the cracklings is not near the quality of what we used to make. And we'd make a cake of cornbread and put that rendered fat called cracklings in that cornbread, and oh my, what a good cake of cornbread that made. I don't know if you ever had it, Tim, or not, but it's something good. Of course, here I am diabetic and I can't eat like that anymore, but still yet, I can reminisce at least. Then we'd, we wouldn't, there was very little of the hog that went to waste. So you trimmed the fat, used it for lard, cracklings and such, even made fat back to season with. And one of my favorites, a lot of people say my favorite's country ham, and we did really enjoy the country ham. But when I was younger, I guess 2 of the most favorite parts of the hog was to take the tenderloin out of the area of the back. And there again, if it had been corn-fed and fattened on corn, you had a lot better quality, even lean meat. And there wasn't nothing like, I don't think, a good mess of tenderloin, gravy, and biscuits for breakfast right when you're butchering hogs. And then a lot of that fat, as well as the trimmings on the lean, we'd work into sausage. And still a lot of the older people like to get a hold of homemade sausage like I used to make, and they like to can it instead of freezing it. And that's interesting. There are just a lot of people that thoroughly enjoy canned sausage, the old timey way. Then most of the time we'd work, like I said, the trimmings, and if we wanted more sausage, we'd work a pork shoulder into sausage. But then the rest of it we would cure. Sugar, my favorite was sugar cure, and a lot of people salt cured, but my favorite was the sugar cure. And I've got a recipe in here for sugar cure that we make in a home mixture. And it just gives us a good quality, sweet taste in our country hams. People would come and buy country ham, and of course back in, if you got $1 or $2 a pound for a country ham, well, you was really doing well. But I'd let a country ham go before I'd let what we call the streaked meat. It was the bacon. Take that bacon and sugar cure it. Oh my, what a good breakfast meat you had. And I've always said, I don't know how many people I've told, I've got 2 girls. Spring of the year we'd have creases. The old native crease was, in our opinion, was much better. And they're hard to find anymore because of the herbicides that we use in corn production. But occasionally you'll find them. But anyway, my wife had fixed creases, crackling cornbread for supper, and she'd render the grease out of that side meat to cook those creases in. And I don't know at the times, that she would do that. We'd have creases for supper, maybe pinto beans. But that streaked meat never make it to the table. If those girls ever got started on it, the way it went. That's how good it was. That's how good it is. And it's quite interesting. But you see, a lot of people don't know anymore. You'd be surprised at the people that don't know how to make biscuit bread anymore. I told some of the men when I retired, I said, I do not remember ever getting up and going to work before my wife got up before I did and made my breakfast. And I'll never forget that. To give you an example of what I'm saying, the youngest daughter lives down here at the end of the driveway. Sometimes she'll call her mother and she'll say, Mama, can I come and eat with you? She said, I get so hungry for your cooking. And I just wonder how many children's missing out on that privilege of having a mother that learned to cook and cook good old country food. You know, there's a lot to the way these mountain people done their cooking and food preparation. As you come up today, I had a devastating storm Thursday. It pretty much wiped my sweet corn out. You can't let such a little bit of disappointment defeat you. But if I live next year, I'll just go again, try it again. Yeah, this is our green beans that we put up in 23. Of course, we still got more to put up. Here we got the spaghetti sauce that she makes. Here she's got soup mixture. Grandkids are crazy about that. Of course, applesauce and jellies, all sorts. Here's a bean a lot of people don't know much about, but they're called dilly beans. They're actually pickled with addition of dill. Then we've got homemade mustard. What really sets a hot dog on. Homemade sweet pickles, oh man, those things are especially good in potato salad. Here again, I can't have much potato salad if any. Pickled beets. And I remember before we had spaghetti sauce, canned tomatoes. Got canned tomatoes down here on the bottom shelf. We had a lot of them with soup beans, such as that. But my wife's really proud of her canned goods. And that's another tradition that's about gone. It's about gone in the country. A lot of work to it, but it pays off when the snow starts blowing.